Pentiment is a very unique game. It's also a very hard sell. It's clearly for a very specific type of audience. And even if you don't fall into that category, you can't help but look at this game and really respect what they did. I don't know how the hell a game like in this day and age got made like this, just because it is so specific and so nerdy and niche, but it is also clearly a labor of love. It is a passion project. It is equal parts mysterious, beautiful from a visual standpoint, to just really oddly educational in a lot of ways, but still managing to not feel stale or crusty and tell an interesting story with heart. So basically what Pentiment is a game that's out for Xbox and PC that is a narrative adventure, but sort of with some like RPG dialogue elements. Now, this is significant specifically because it's from Obsidian, or a smaller team at Obsidian. Specifically, I mean, Obsidian is the people behind stuff like Pillars of Eternity, The Outer Worlds, Fallout New Vegas, the list goes on and on. They have a pedigree in RPGs, and this is, as you can obviously tell, very, very different for them. This is a 2D style talkie adventure game set in the 16th century. So it's 1500s Germany or Bavaria, and dealing with the Reformation, the Holy Roman Empire, the church basically controlling everything, Christianity, and just how art went down back then. It tackles a lot, but like when you boil it down, it is an adventure where you play as this guy named Andreas, and it's a pretty long adventure that spans a pretty long time period, but the game lets you kind of build out this Andreas by not only just choosing what to say and what to ask as him, but giving you some classic style RPG stuff where you choose your background. At multiple points during the game, you kind of build on Andreas's character by picking, where he went to school, what he studies, what languages he knows, that type of thing. And all of those things crop up in conversation here and there, and they feel significant and meaningful. RPGs can either go one or two ways, where it feels like it's just set dressing, it's an additional thing to click on to get another sentence, or something that will actually impact the flow of the conversation. And from what I've seen through playing through this, the different choices, the different life paths, so to speak, you choose for Andreas do actually change the conversation or change where things are going. And despite this looking very much like something from one of my old art history textbooks, it is very much inspired by illuminated manuscripts and Renaissance era stuff, but specifically that workman-like style. The way this game takes that visual style and kind of translates it to a game really works. And now I'm not the first person who said I've heard this somewhere else, but essentially it's like a mix between those old illuminated manuscript styles, right, like you see here, and something a little bit more of like an online web comic or like an old Flash cartoon video. And I think it's a really good blend of styles, not only just because of how they made it work for a video game, but also it's something that you don't really see represented. Obviously, with this time period, you get the great sweeping masters of the Renaissance, but this type of stuff specifically, more of this almost, dare I say, tapestry or storybook look, you don't really see. And while it sticks to the manuscript stuff, every once in a while the game will break out and reference other visual styles of this time period that just really are like a nice stark difference, and it's a good kind of visual change up. I don't want to like totally spoil all that if you are into art history and stuff, but it's nice to see. What I like is that it's not just a gimmick, because this is a very story and dialogue heavy thing. The game is constantly throwing names, terms at you, things that you may not know, and in those dialogue moments, certain highlighted words or names all allow you to press a button to break out of the panel and see a larger book, which is the way this whole game is set around. And then that book will give you, in the smaller margins, descriptions of whatever you're looking for, whether it's just an old-timey word or a reference to a location that you don't know, but also refreshers on characters. The game deals with so many characters that are, rooted in faith. So it's like sister this, brother this, mother this here. And like, so the game understands that you can lose track. So the book will also allow you to break out and have quick reference and just see a little sketch or image of a person's face that is being referenced. And that goes a long way for helping out this story, because it is such a text heavy, long dialogue moments type of driven thing. So for the game to not only use the book thing to its advantage and not just be a visual gimmick, but also to just kind of help keep things along and keep you in the loop and keep you understanding and keep you kind of constantly referencing the cliff notes at the bottom, really works. Like to the point where I'd want to see this in more games, but also not to get like dorky dad for a minute, but also from an educational standpoint, it is really good to see how often you can instantly break away from a conversation to see what they're referencing. An old war, a country or a group that doesn't exist anymore, a king, a duke, a whatever, the state of art in different places. Like all of that is available to you. The game will explain to you whatever you want. And it's a really good digestible way that doesn't turn you off. I get turned off from educational experiences all the time, but thankfully this game didn't do it. And really the other part that helps with that is that the story is like a real ass story. It's not like this like whimsical old timey story. It's a murder mystery. The whole game is centered around a murder and how that impacts, years going forward with like believable people, believable responses to things going on, but also rooted in something it's trying to tell you how life was like back then, how significantly faith is woven into everything, how religion affects everything, how the religion essentially rules a lot of the land, how the economy works, how art even works and how it is paid for, and then of course like the class hierarchies within all of that. Like it's committed to that stuff. Like it wants to tell you all the ins and outs and all the subtleties of the clergy of this time period and how things work. But when people speak, when you read dialogue and stuff, it's understandable. They're not like, oh, doth this, like it's very believable, real, convincing dialogue that is often very cynical, very funny, very light, and it really works. The game has occasional conversation checks where like you were able to make a big bet on saying something in a conversation based on like how well you did hitting other notes in the conversation earlier on, and you can pass or fail those. And again, like I said earlier, you can use your upbringing and things added to Andreas's character to also click on and choose where conversation goes. But what I like about the dialogue and really about like the story and moments and things you choose to say or ask, there's a lot also in what you choose not to say. And I don't mean that just in terms of like skipping something or just hitting the ... but actually that impacting things going forward. The game has a really cool way of approaching like the weight behind the words, and specifically a lot of the times it is through that. It's through what you say or specifically how you say it. A lot of times you're given basically saying the same thing but in 3 different ways, 3 different temperatures, so to speak. And it goes with this whole gray area thing of this game, which is really cool, is how, and I'm not spoiling anything, but with it being a murder mystery, it's not a definitive murder mystery. And I think that probably encourages some replayability, but also just is a little bit more of an interesting thing in the storytelling, where it's not necessarily Knives Out. It's not this whodunit. It's not Clue. Like the main focus isn't necessarily on unraveling the mystery. It's the story that kind of blooms around it, Because it is a very chill, low-key, dialogue-heavy game. Like if you're into like a Disco Elysium or even a Night in the Woods or something like that, but you like a little bit of history as well, I definitely steer you in this direction if you're that type of player. But it's something that I definitely enjoyed, like streaming on a smaller device and then playing it on Steam Deck. Definitely seems to be the way to go, just because it is such a dialogue thing. It's clicking and reading. It's, visual novel territory, but with the occasional fun little mini game to change things up. And again, like I said, all of it is structured around the game really wanting to show you what life was like back then, but making it a little bit fun, a little bit accessible. Everything is focused around a clock. The game is structured around how much you can squeeze in specific points of the day, and those are all broken up by all the things you have to do. People worked a lot back then, but they also stopped to eat and pray very frequently, and how important and how kind of like everyday pedestrian, it's just like the thing you do and how you kind of roll into that and you get used to the game's flow. And it's interesting. And like, although I myself am not religious or anything, the way the story portrays religion, it almost kind of makes it a little bit mundane, still treats it with reverence, but also just kind of builds it into the everyday part of life. Just makes it kind of convincing and insightful. I don't think I've seen a game tackle religion quite like this. The passage of time makes you have to kind of prioritize where you want to pursue certain things, what characters you want to speak to, what little bits of information you want to glean about the world or the village that you're spending most of the time in. And it also adds a little bit of like almost like a, you know, like a Majora's Mask kind of urgency to things, because the clock is always ticking. And the passage of time thing really kind of also transcends to the whole story it's trying to tell, that again tackles so many different subjects in this time period, but also just the impact of things, like as things move forward, how is it seeing people you haven't seen again in a long time, or how have events really changed, how has the town really grown. Like this stuff is all tackled in some pretty cool ways, not only just from the story standpoint, but also visually as well. The art does a really good job of reflecting different moments in time without, like, you know, going too much into spoilers. Can you tell I'm kind of yapping about this one a lot? I didn't expect it to, you know, it's like a 15-20 hour game or something like that. I cruised through it, I had a lot of fun, and I knew making this video meant it wasn't going to get a lot of views. You know, I don't think a lot, like this isn't going to be like God of War Ragnarok. Like it's not going to be this mainstream thing, but it's so different and it's so refreshing that this team got to make this odd thing. It's not necessarily a game that lectures you about like a religion or an art style or anything. It just kind of tells an interesting and nuanced story within that, and it has enthusiasm for all of that, like a good history teacher would. Not like a shitty one that would show up late and then just put a movie on. Like I'm talking like one of those teachers you would have that actually really gives a damn. I had my eye on this one since like it was first revealed at an event thing a couple of months ago. Like they showed the trailer and I was like, whoa, what is that, dude? Just knowing that visual style. So since then, it hasn't really had a lot of news around it, and now it's out, and you may have seen some reviews. It seems like people are digging it. So I would say, like, if some of this stuff interests you, go for it. If you look at this and you're like, I don't know, man, like I will not force you. This is very, very much an acquired taste. The game has a slow start. It can feel a little dry at the beginning until it starts to really click, until you really get what they're trying to do here. So it's a tough sell, but again, I think it was a tough sell for Obsidian to even make this game in the first place, because we haven't really seen a lot of experiences like this. But again, I think that's worth celebrating. I'm happy I spent some time with this one. Another example of like when people say that like modern video games are like out of ideas or like, you know, creatively bankrupt or anything like that. There are things out there. They may not necessarily be something you want to run and play, but they are still making weird, quirky games, and Pentiment is definitely one. That's where I'm at. Very cool thing I wanted to highlight. I mean, I even talked about this with Scorn, just like having a little bit of like in school art history background. I just appreciate some of this stuff. So maybe if you're not, but you jumped into the game, maybe you just love RPGs. I'd love to know what you think. If you're just on the outside looking in and you're not sure if you're going to jump into playing this, I want to know what your expectations are, or if it's just not for you. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's good to know what type of games you want to play. So if you're skipping this one, fine. But if you heard me out and, you know, you checked out this video, I appreciate you stopping by. I really appreciate any of you guys stopping by. If you like what I'm trying to do here, just talk about stuff I love, stuff that I find interesting in games and movies, clicking the like button is all you got to do. It legitimately helps me out. But that's it, guys. I'm Jake Baldino. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Pizza's on me. Subscribe because video games.